Now you're welcome along. So we're talking rugby, women's rugby specifically, and there is a lot to talk about. So to do so, very happy to say we're joined by Niamh Briggs, two-time Six Nations winner, played at 2 World Cups. We have Fiona Coghlan, 85 Ireland caps over 13 years, 3 World Cups. And Alison Miller, Grand Slam winner as well, played for Ireland 2010 to 2019. You're all very welcome. Niamh, we'll start with the Inter-Pro series in a few moments rather, but really we have to start with Ireland, because when we booked all you guys in to talk last week, I think we probably anticipated we'd spend a quick 5 minutes on how Ireland had beaten Spain, and Italy to come and Scotland were very important, and all of a sudden Ireland and their World Cup hopes are in jeopardy, to say the least. So Spain 8, Ireland 7. The format of this 3-game run over in Italy is that Ireland plays Spain, Italy and Scotland. There's one automatic place for the World Cup in New Zealand next year. I'm sure Ireland were very hopeful of nabbing that one automatic spot. Pretty much you'd say after losing to Spain last night, that's gone now realistically as a possibility.
I'm not sure. I think there's also a place for the runner-up of this tournament to go into a repechage. It looks like to be in December. Yeah. So all isn't lost from that perspective. I do think if Ireland can beat Italy and Scotland, you have to feel that Italy will probably turn Spain over, or even Scotland. I think it's very open now. Definitely not where Ireland wanted to be, in that they're waiting on other countries to do them a favour while also have to do their job for the next 2 games. I think they'll know that that they really, really underperformed last night. I think they'll be incredibly disappointed with so many errors and things that were in their own control. And I think that would probably be the most disappointing issue for them.
Fiona, Ireland 8th in the world, Spain are 9th, and by all accounts an improving force. Am I overstating kind of the surprise that we might have, or the assumption that Ireland were always going to win this game?
I think it comes from the fact that we haven't seen Spain at a high enough level over the last number of years. Obviously they used to be in the Six Nations when I first started playing, so it was easier to judge them then. But they've only had the likes of the Netherlands and Russia to play against this year, and they obliterated them. So it was very hard to judge exactly where they stood. They have an awful lot of sevens players coming through. They're ranked 8th, but you couldn't judge them on that because that was based pretty much on the last World Cup and then big wins against those teams I've spoken about. But they were always going to be a threat to a certain degree. I didn't think they'd be as fit as they were. I thought they started the game incredibly well. I didn't think they'd lasted the full game, but I think that was as much to do with Ireland's errors and penalty count as anything else. And Ireland, that was certainly probably the worst performance I've seen from them in the last number of years. They came back in the Six Nations after an 18-month break with no rustiness, beat Wales well, a disappointing loss to France, and then beat Italy really well in the last game. So I'm not buying into this whole rustiness thing. Like they've had probably more prep than any other team going into this competition.
Mm. Can I ask you though about the the Six Nations, because a lot of us watched those games. They were on TV. I know obviously you were on commentary for them as well. So there was the 45-0 win away to Wales. By all accounts, a very poor Wales side. France were France, and they were brilliant, and they put 56 points on Ireland. The Italian game, Ireland 25, Italy 5. It was 8-0 at half time. That struck me, and so look, I'm watching with not a hint of the expertise that you all have when it comes to this area. But that would have struck me watching that game, Fiona, as error strewn. I watched it and I was massively disappointed in Ireland. And yeah, they won 25-5 in the end. But half-time in particular, I remember thinking there were so many basic mistakes, so many basic errors. So I wonder, when we're talking about mistakes now against Spain, if it's not a little bit of a continuation of a theme.
Yeah, as you said, the basic skills, the amount of knock-ons, the amount of penalties in that Italian game was really poor, and they chalked off some tries, both pace on the wing and, a bit of strength, individual, I suppose, more so than team. And I question what's actually happening in training, and it's very hard to know when you're not in there, but what standard is acceptable with regards to those basic individual errors, that penalty count? Like, there is absolutely no excuse for the penalty count last night. And that comes down to what are they getting away with at training, what's acceptable? And clearly anything goes based on that. But as I said, it's very hard to know when you're not in there.
Yeah.
And a certain level of that is individual players have to take personal responsibility, but also coaches can't let that go and think it's acceptable.
Yes, and look, we don't know what's going on in training, but we can only judge what we're seeing on the pitch. Alison, anything goes. That sense of where the standards is what's coming from Fiona. What did you make of the game?
A very disappointing game. I think probably the difference between this tournament and the Six Nations is that Ireland would have been expected to be the favourites to probably win the competition and would have been favoured to do so. So I'm just wondering, did they... Obviously, there was a lot of set-piece issues, the line-out malfunction, the scrum was under a lot of pressure, a lot of handling errors, catch-pass, execution, a lot of things behind the gain line. But, it was a disappointing game. Like, Ireland got off to a relatively good start with the Parsons try, and you kind of thought it was going to go from there. But just the errors compounded, and a disappointing performance from some players. I suppose I didn't understand one or two substitutions either at critical times, which I mean, Bevan Parsons was taken off, and I know she had a few more errors than she normally would have had, but I think she's probably one of your biggest threats with Amy Lee Murphy-Crowe. So to take her off when the game was certainly not won was kind of, I didn't understand it anyway. I definitely didn't understand it. I think Stacey Flood had possibly maybe injury issue, but really disappointing. And I wonder, did the pressure that they were seen as favourites for this competition get to them? And obviously there's errors were in the Six Nations, but they continued on. And if that's what's happening in training, and it can't happen. But for Spain's last try, there was a player that just shot up out of the line. Yeah. Like, really, it was really poor stuff. And I mean, if that's what you're doing in an international game with 2 or 3 minutes to go and trying to defend, it's just not good enough. Yeah,
the player shooting up out of the line caught the eye, Niamh, obviously trying to make a big hit and make an impact, but it seemed to be out of tune with what the rest of the team were trying to do.
Yeah, hugely. I think that was probably the theme of the game, really. I think they were devoid of probably any proper game plan. It was hard to see what they were trying to do. At the very start, it looked like, they got change out of getting to the edge early because Parsons obviously scored that try. But then Spain became very wise to that and started to shut that space down. And they never looked to change it. They never looked like they were able to, change it, offer short targets, maybe earn that right to go wide, and have runners off the back. I just think couldn't put any kind of continuity or phases together. And for me, that last 4 or 5 minutes really epitomised probably the whole of the game. As you say, Emer jumping out of the line and trying to shut that down when realistically you're 7-3 up. You've been under a huge amount of pressure in and around your 22. You've got to hold steady, and you've got to know that really, even if you do make a big hit there, they were still on top because they still had players around the ball. We only had one, we only had Amy Lee Murphy-Crowe outside of that. So if they had a quick recycle from that big hit, they were still probably going to score. So it's about being able to read that game and understanding why you can't go. And I think that was the big thing. They didn't really seem to understand where the space was or how to generate space. And yeah, look, I think from that aspect, I think the girls obviously spoke about the errors and the basic handling errors. It was incredibly frustrating. And as Fee said, you wonder about their training sessions. Are they putting their core skills under pressure in kind of match type situations where, as nothing goes in terms of everything is called. If it's turnover, then there's repercussions for it. If there's a penalty given away, there's repercussions for that. And clearly, they just seem to let the game pass them by. And I think that's probably the most disappointing thing for them.
Fiona, day to day, obviously these players have jobs and lives as well as everything else. Who are they working with day to day when it comes to their skills and their standards away from camp? Because I guess Niamh Briggs only has so much time with the players.
I'm not sure if those skill sessions are going on around the province. Niamh might be able to comment on that. I remember when we were going into the World Cup in 2013, the coaches travelled the provinces and did provincial skills sessions one night a week linked in with your strength and conditioning. I don't think they're going ahead. So it's up to then back at club, which we obviously haven't had club rugby. And then it comes down to individual players coming together and just wanting to improve and doing those skills. Obviously, a good number of them are in sevens training, so they would have it on a daily basis. But it doesn't appear to be a cohesiveness programme around it. Now, I don't know, Niamh, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm not sure if there is those provincial skill sessions anymore.
No, there isn't. So they have them in Dublin because it's such a core group of girls that are in Dublin. The majority of the squad are up there. I think for the girls, like Ciara Griffin and them that aren't in Dublin, they've just been coming to club training up until the middle/end of July, and then that was stopped because of COVID and issues with bubbles. And so from that aspect, I'd say majority of the squad definitely had one night a week, where similar to what Fee was saying there in terms of the sessions are bought in with their S&C. But for those not in Dublin, I don't think they had any contact time unless they were in camp.
And is there no way, sorry Niamh, that those girls living outside Dublin can't go to the provincial hubs and be facilitated that way to get their skills up?
Yeah, hugely. I think I've had a few of them come to our sessions in Bowes throughout summer, because for the first 6 weeks of our pre-season was all just skills based, because obviously we had so many girls not playing rugby for such a long time. And they came, and it was great. It was great to have them, because they felt they were getting something out of it, but we were too in relation to the club.
That was more so you facilitating those players for their good.
Yeah.
Rather than an organised.
Yeah. I think the issue been is that there's so few players outside of Dublin now that how can you genuinely have a really good skill session with maybe 2 players? And to be fair, in Tom Tierney's regime, he used to we used to have similar one night a week, and he would go to Belfast, and Claire Mack was the only one up in Belfast, but he would tell her to take 5 or 6 of the best club players so they could have a group of players to be able to do skills with. So yeah, look, I think something like that might be an option, I think, post this tournament. But I think their general skill level probably really let them down last night.
But it's no surprise, really, if you're describing the landscape as we understand it, as up to yourself, do your best on your own, nothing organised. I mean, you wonder why Irish management aren't going around to various hubs and saying, well, if it is just you, bring the 5 or 6 best that you have around you. Hell, you might discover someone there and work and try and improve it, because everything you're describing for the players outside of Dublin, say, that looks like it just came to fruition, Fiona, in the game. Like, we've absolutely no right to be surprised by the performance, given everything we've just heard there.
Well, I still think there's a huge cohort based in Dublin or over in the Premiership that would be doing skills a couple of nights a week with their club. So, there's probably just a handful outside Dublin. So It just depends then what they're actually doing in those skills camps. And as Niamh said earlier, are they being put under pressure? And then that's obviously not transferring to the game because they're not able to execute under pressure.
Yeah, okay. So the Dublin players, then, it's a different story. Because again, not to hark back to the Italy game, I didn't get to see last night's game. I've been away. I must look back on it. But like I said, I would have thought, Fiona, after the Italy game, for instance, and maybe the Six Nations at large, France were very, very good, to be fair, and Wales it was harder to judge a performance against that Welsh team. But I would have thought one of the key things that would have been taken away from the Six Nations just gone was, well, over this summer, the basic skills, we need to improve them massively, because there were lots of moments in games where line out didn't function, and there was a big Dorothy Wall carry, and then there was a knock on or a drop pass or just something frustrating to hold up the play. I would have thought from the Six Nations just gone, skill set would have been the priority.
Yeah, because they showed that they were fit. The fitness was there, and that's carried through. They do look fit. And if you flip that around and look at Italy's performance yesterday, their basic skills were absolutely outstanding. Notwithstanding the fact that Scotland's defence was quite poor, but they've clearly gone away and worked on that over the summer. And it's so difficult to know when you're not in camp. And I've said that a few times, and I think you said it, Joe, it's standards and what standards are acceptable. And unless you're reaching those standards week in, week out in camp, you're not going to put them forward on a pitch. So, I'm not even sure, is there a specific skills coach within it? There's forwards coach. I don't even know within the management if there's a specific skills coach for those basic skills. So that, again, could be an area for them to look at going forward, but it's going to be too late for this competition.
Yeah.
And sorry, can I just say another thing? I don't know whether they were a little bit complacent about Spain with regards to the likes of selection. You're bringing on 2 new caps. Lucy Munhall has she even played a handful of 15s games. Don't get me wrong, she's a phenomenal athlete and she's a skillful sevens rugby player, but given 2 new caps out, it kind of is a little bit disrespectful to Spain.
I did want to ask Niamh, so you mentioned game understanding a couple of times. Is the balance okay there in terms of those that you're trying to bring through from sevens who might not have the game understanding of those who've been playing loads of 15s? Or when I say sevens here, it's almost as if I'm talking about players who haven't played 15s all the way coming through, so they actually do have more game understanding than I'm giving them credit for. But that'd be an interesting point maybe to get your thoughts on.
Yeah, look, I think there are a few of those sevens players that wouldn't really have played 15s before.
Okay.
And you know, you can train all you want and put yourselves into environments where they're learning the game, but until you're actually in the goal face where you are facing that line speed, you're under pressure mentally as opposed to physically. It can make things seem worse than what they are. And I think that was probably it yesterday. I thought, I just felt that Ireland were incredibly lateral and flat in their attack. I thought there was probably space in behind that we didn't look to utilise. And when you look at like Stacey Flood just come into the 15s team, she has a huge amount of potential. But then you need somebody like a Sene to turn around and take control of that attack and say, this is what we're doing and this is what we're running. And I felt, you know, they're still all quite young in that back line, taking Sene out of it in terms of international experience. And it's a lot of pressure to heap on one player. So, look, I think, you know, I listened to Ciara speak afterwards last night, and like their endeavour was obviously, you know, something that will never be put in question. But I just think, for me, you know, if you're looking at that game and you're coaching that side and you're thinking, okay, look, we've gone to the edge a couple of times, we've got changed first, but now they've shut it down. Where is the space? You know, where is that space? Well, the space is either in the backfield or it's somewhere up through the middle. And to be fair to Spain, you know, their line speed was incredible, but they contested a huge amount of rucks. And if you're going to contest rucks, then there has to be space after two big carries elsewhere. So I think that Ireland needed to look after the ball a little bit better. So their ball carrier in and around that close contact needed to be more efficient in order for them to be able to play the type of game that they wanted to play. And when you have the likes of a Baby and Parsons or an Amy Lee Murphy-Crowe on the pitch, you've got to look to try and get them into the game at every opportunity. And that doesn't mean that they've got to be standing on the wing waiting for the ball to come to them. They have to be able to work off it and be able to find space inside in those close quarters. And I just don't feel like that we offered any threat in a backline stacked full of pace and probably sprinkle of stardust. You know, their footwork is incredible and we just never saw it. And I think that for me probably poses a huge big question mark to how they train and their game plan.
Yeah.
But I don't, sorry, Joe, I don't think we saw it with the forwards either. If you're talking about big ball carries off the likes of Dorothy Wall, Lindsay Peat, we didn't see them coming to the game that much, except maybe Dorothy the odd time off the odd line out when it went right. But we didn't see her in the middle of the park with those barging runs that we probably have seen before. So it just seemed to be a whole lack of cohesiveness in their game plan and what they were trying to achieve. You know, and it's certainly not Stacey's fault. She does not have a huge amount of experience there, but we're on this, I don't know, it's 13 number 10 since the 2017 World Cup. Like, there's been absolutely no consistency in that half position. And that has been a huge worry for me over the last number of years.
And to be fair, I hope they stick with her because I think she's incredibly intelligent. She's got a beautiful pass and she's got a really good boot. I just felt yesterday, after the first few minutes, it was almost like a shock to the system that they couldn't understand the line speed from Spain. They couldn't understand the physicality maybe. And they started to creep up on the ruck, and therefore they were just so flat and didn't give themselves enough time. And good players and the best players at that level always look like they have time on the ball, and unfortunately it didn't look like that yesterday.
Alison, a question which, I mean, I'm listening to you guys discussing the aspects of the performance here, and it's really interesting. The obvious question now, I suppose, is where does management come into this? As in, does Adam Griggs have players whereby they should be putting in much better performances? Or, in fairness to him and his team, is this just the quality of player he has available to him and that's where the team is in reality?
No, like the team were capable of beating Spain. I think, at the end of the day, they should have beaten Spain regardless. Even if even if Ireland hadn't played particularly well last night, I would still expect Ireland to beat Spain. I think the players, obviously the management will pull them in, but the players themselves will have to regroup and figure out what they need to do and what's the best way to go about it. like there has been, I suppose, as Briggs said there, like many different tens since Nora Staples' retirement. But there's also been quite a change up of different players, like different centres. Like Michelle Claffey had been in the centre probably, whatever Six Nations was, and then there's been Eve Higgins, and then there was Lucy. Different players coming in. Claire Molloy wasn't involved last night. There's different players coming in and out a lot of the time. So for me, it's probably not a settled 15 ever. It's quite changeable. I don't know if that has an impact, but I think they need to really regroup and figure out what they want to do. It's obviously, as Briggs said earlier, they're relying on maybe other teams to lose or whatever it is and points and all that, but they just have to go and perform and stop the errors in the line out, stop the errors like what was going on with the scrum. Fiona might be able to tell us. There's two backs here, but different things like that. They really need to. But as I said, they were well capable of beating Spain. And regardless, I know I said there's been different people coming in and out, but they still should be capable of beating Spain. But I thought, credit to Spain, Patricia Garcia at 9 really controlled them really, really well. She's a super player, and I think how they played, Ireland wouldn't have known much about Spain, but I suppose for that regard, they probably were always more of a threat to Ireland because we don't see much of them. The last time I think Ireland played, it was us three playing against Spain in 2013. So, yeah, there's going to be a leadership group within the squad, and they'll have to come together and then work with all the different players. But I still think they should be beating Spain, even if they don't perform well.
Fiona, what's your assessment of management?
I just didn't think there was a clear game plan there. Niamh said it earlier, they looked to go wide, but then there wasn't that change up even in the second half. Using those runners through the middle, working through the phases. It was more of an individual performance than a team performance. Even the line-outs didn't get fixed at half-time, and there was a simple thing, was about movement on the ground and not identifying where the space was, and it made life easier for Spain to get up. And again, selection, I think that's a huge thing. How you don't have Claire Molloy in a squad. I know she probably was carrying an injury in the Six Nations that she didn't perform, but you need someone like that that's going to slow down their ball, that's going to be a nightmare around the ruck. She is a world-class player. And I can't understand how she isn't in the squad. And then if you flip back even to the Inter-pros, how some of those players weren't selected in the original squad, I don't know what he's basing his squad selection on.
The one player that sticks out to me is Chloe Pearce, because she's just been ripping it up in the Inter-pros, and just even to a player like that to be full of confidence, would you not bring them? Because they're just, going to be so confident that you would like to see her play at the moment over there in Italy.
I can kind of see from a scrummaging perspective why she wouldn't be first choice scrummaging, but I'd nearly have her in the back row the way she plays.
Yeah.
Niamh, your thoughts on management at the moment? Obviously, 2020 is a nightmare, so you've got to be fair as well.
Yeah, but I think every country's been dealing with that same issue, I think. So I'm similar to the two girls. I think lack of game plan at times. And then you've got to be able to fix on the go. I think sometimes when you go into a game and you've got, you have your points and you know exactly what you're looking for, and sometimes the opposition throws up something else. You've got to be you've got to be able to very quickly get your message on in relation to changing up that game plan and understanding where things can be fixed and sometimes, I just felt yesterday that those girls needed just a steadying hand to just literally tell them, we're just going to do this for a few phases. We're just going to, go to a 5-man line out, just get up straight away, look to hit a big runner up the middle. We can go off that then. We can look to get on the outside. And there didn't really seem to be anything like that. So I think both players and management probably take stock today and realise that they all made mistakes. I agree 100% with Fiona Coghlan in terms of Claire Molloy. She's possibly the only world-class player we have. And that's no disrespect to those girls. But Claire Molloy's been a world-class player for Ireland for how many years? And you don't become a bad player overnight. And you needed that experience yesterday to literally just pull them all in and say, okay, this is what we're going to, this is where we're going. And literally take a deep breath, stop being so frantic and bring it back to what we're strong at. And I just felt like we didn't play to our strengths yesterday.
Okay. Fiona, just a last one for you before we move to the Inter-pros. So it's Italy on Saturday at the same stadium. They hammered Scotland at the weekend. Like Niamh said, second in this mini group now does get Ireland into a repechage and another chance to qualify for the World Cup. So, I mean, second at a minimum here. They do have I guess unusually for them, the benefit of all this time together now, so they can put things right and get some warm weather training done and hopefully re-emerge on Saturday in better shape. Would you be confident? I mean, it's hard to ask that question after the conversation we just had, but would you be in any way confident Ireland can turn this around against Italy?
I think it is within the squad, but I wonder what state they're in mentally. And obviously Italy are on a high. Italy are at home. We lost to Italy 2 years ago at home. I know there's no crowds there, so that kind of takes that out of the equation. Italy sometimes lack consistency week in, week out, like performances over Six Nations, like they'd beat France one weekend and then they'd lose to Scotland. So sometimes consistency is their problem, but Italy were very impressive yesterday. And I said it already, Scotland were poor, but Italy, their basic skills, they're offloading. I still would have thought going into this that Ireland were a better squad than Italy. They had a better bench maybe coming off, but a lot depends on mentally where they're at. I know they're together for the week, but there's going to be very little time of that on the pitch. In terms of recovery, like it's whatever, a 6-day turnaround, 5-day turnaround, they'll have very little time on the pitch to actually fix things. So it's mentally where they're at and whether they can step it up at the weekend.
Yeah. From memory of the Six Nations game, I think you were on commentary that game as well. Italy run the ball from everywhere.
They did, like their own 22. They didn't kick it when the space was in behind, and they put themselves under a huge amount of pressure. In fairness, they found space on the edge against Scotland yesterday. They did probably kick a little bit more and a little bit more accurately, but no, it's not necessarily in their game plan to kick the ball even from their own try line. So it'll be interesting what they do against Ireland.
Yeah. Niamh, does that suit Ireland if Italy decide to run from everywhere? Can you plan accordingly and maybe put them under certain kind of pressure and force turnovers high up the pitch?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, to be fair, I like their defensive system. They look to have a big rush on. They look to fill the field so that they don't really contest rucks and or shouldn't really contest rucks. Their 9 is in the line. So if you look up as an Italian player, you're perceived that you have very little space anywhere, and you're trying to force them to kick. And if they don't want to kick, then you're in the ascendancy. So I think they lacked energy last night at times. I think if they can, as Fee said, get themselves mentally up for this and come with energy, then and it's controlled energy, I think then they could be in a huge position. And all you're looking for is a little bit, to give yourself a little bit of confidence to be able to go and play the game that you want. And I think that's what they've got to do. They've got to celebrate the little wins that they get at the weekend, and then hopefully then they can push on from it.
Okay, well look, an interesting couple of weeks coming up to say the least for Ireland. We're talking here with Niamh Briggs and Fiona Coghlan and Alison Miller. We'll turn to the Inter-Pros. They're sponsored by Vodafone, proud sponsors of the Vodafone Women's Inter-provincial Championship. So this competition's run over the last 3 weeks. Munster have emerged as the winners, 3 wins from 3. They beat Leinster on Saturday, 19 points to 7 at Energia Park. Leinster have 2 wins from 3, and then Connacht and Ulster both lost to Munster and Leinster and then drew with each other on the Saturday. It was unfortunate with the moving of the football final, the All-Ireland, that it clashed with the All-Ireland final on Saturday, but it was on TG Carr nonetheless, which is great for the game. I suppose, Niamh, I know, I'm in two minds about this, because there's something disingenuous about media when we say, well, we hate to talk about these things, when actually these things generate the most clicks, as opposed to actually talking about the matches. And so we can't not talk about it, I suppose, is the reality. I think you'll all vouch for the fact we were due to talk about these games before this controversy at the weekend. So this was the Ulster-Connacht match, which did finish 12 points apiece, and we will talk about the rugby as well and get your thoughts on who emerged or who might be putting their hands up for an Irish squad place down the line. For people who didn't catch what happened here, in effect, the Connacht and then subsequently the Ulster players as well for this match at 5 o'clock, they were changing in a part of the ground which looked fairly squalid, to be honest. There were rats nearby. It was a Connacht player who surveyed the scene with their phone, and really that's how this came to light. Women's rugby is not deemed elite, therefore no dressing rooms as of yet is the situation. So this thing blew up in a big way. Obviously a terrible look for the game. By Sunday there was an IRFU apology. The IRFU and Leinster Rugby would like to apologise to players, management, representatives of Connacht Rugby and Ulster Rugby, and they're sorry for the inconvenience caused by an unacceptable error, they say, in relation to the positioning of temporary changing facilities. they again emphasise how sorry they are for the inconvenience to the teams and the upset that this unacceptable error has caused. Cian Tracy was in touch with Leinster and the IRFU and the Irish Independent this morning. So what seems to have happened was that there was another area designated, but according to Leinster, the Connacht team arrived earlier than scheduled, they told the Irish Independent today. So the match operations staff from Leinster were not yet at the ground. Connacht were advised of the incorrect area to change in, and then this error was compounded when Ulster were also set up in this area. So it seemed like they told Cian Tracy today, the match operations staff from Leinster weren't at the ground when Connacht arrived, and that's how they ended up in this part of the ground. Not that they're saying it's okay or anything, but that's their explanation as to how it happened. And it seems Connacht did ask, when they were shown where they're meant to be changing, they did kind of question the suitability, but there were no match operations staff to hand. And so, Niamh, this whole thing blows up and dominates, and it's all anyone will remember, I think, from the competition in many ways, the casual fan that is. So it's just another unhelpful look for the game, not to mention how unfair it was in the players, obviously.
Yeah, look, it's hugely frustrating that we're sitting here talking about something off the pitch when really after the weekend, I just want to be talking about the brilliant rugby that was on it. But look, it's not the case, and it was a pretty poor look for sure. I think there's just so many questions to be asked and not all answered. I still can't understand how these players were not deemed a part of the elite status when GA players were able to use dressing rooms in Croke Park. And that for me is probably the biggest question mark that lands over this.
And I think just reading the Irish Independent again today, Cian Tracy asked that question, and it does seem that the IRFU looked for an exemption, which wasn't forthcoming from the authorities, the government, I presume, in this case. So that's where they are on that one.
Yeah, look, and that's, look, that's a decision that's taken out of everybody's hands, I suppose. And look, you don't want to be laying blame on anybody's doorstep, but look, it looked horrendous. And in terms of, when something goes out on social media and everybody jumping up and down about it, and rightly so, I think, for those players to be able to prepare to go out and represent your province in conditions like that, just really, it's just so disappointing. And disappointing that we seem to be taking a step forward with the likes of TG Gahar and Vodafone, and then taking a step back in relation to, the facilities or whatever it was. And it was interesting that, Connacht arrived early and the organisation behind the scenes just weren't aware that they were coming early and put them in a place that really was not suitable for any athlete to be changing in. When their designated zone was a good chunk away from that. It was at the end of the Wesley side of the pitch where they should have been set up, and that was perfectly okay in terms of if it was away from TV cameras. They had privacy, but it was also clean and there weren't bins around. So look, I think there should be some sort of inquiry in relation to it, I think, and like, it's another apology, and I feel like that's tough for those players to be able to go out. Like we also were changing in a gazebo behind Bective End, but it was perfectly fine. We were all given, we as Munster management were given a map of the grounds during the week and an X marking the spot that you were setting up in, and so when we got there, obviously the first match was on, so we didn't have the predicament where there wasn't any match operational staff there, but we just knew where we were going. And I think that the failure of anybody to help and direct Connacht and Ulster to the position that they were in is ultimately the mistake, I suppose.
Yeah. Fiona, I suspect any inquiry will simply conclude have the match operation staff there early. So if a team does arrive a little ahead of schedule, you can show them the allocated changing area. I mean, it's frustrating because that's such a simple conclusion, and yet the mistake happens and it all blows up. So it's just one of those head in your hands moments again, I suppose, for you and everybody who wants the sport to be really taken seriously and to really progress.
Yeah, like I don't think anyone purposely goes out to shaft the women's rugby players,
No.
but the fact that there's not someone there to make sure it all goes to plan, particularly because I believe Leinster had changed in similar area to Connacht, maybe a bit down from the dumpster the previous week. So it was deemed unacceptable then. So surely then someone should have been there the following week to make sure that it would all went to plan. Regardless, surely you should know what time teams are coming up. There should be a liaison person there. Whoever's running the event should know what time when teams are arriving and be there, or if they can't be there, to make sure that the messages are passed on. I still have huge issues around that elite. So my understanding is it's elite that are allowed indoors, whether they're amateur or professional. But I thought there was something about test events as well, that test events were deemed elite events and this was deemed a test event. So there's just that lack of, I suppose, communication and understanding. And I appreciate that it's all got to do with COVID and it's all COVID related, but I just still think there's a lack of kind of clear communication from all parties, from the government down to IRFU, down to the team management, that hasn't been there throughout.
Yeah. Alison?
Well, what I don't understand about it is I don't know how someone even, like, how early did Connacht arrive? Like they didn't arrive hours before. Like, no. Why weren't?
I don't think it was 10 a.m. Put it that way.
No, like that's someone's job to stand over that. And if Leinster had changed there the previous week, like nowadays we all know how the world works. One quick video out there online. So what I don't even understand is how they didn't even foresee that someone might take a video of the shambolic area that they were changing in, and that what did happen. So who stood over that and said, "Oh, that's fine. Nothing will happen at this." Like it was like it was going to happen anyway because of how social media works now. But I just don't think it's good enough to say, the team arrived early. Like if it's just, it looked horrific. It really looked bad, and for someone to stand over that and say, "Well, that's okay," and not to predict that what happened. That's the way the world works now.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure what time Ulster arrived. Like, they don't specifically say Ulster arrived earlier, but they do say that Leinster to Keane Tracy, they say this era was compounded when Ulster were also set up in this area. So I don't quite know why Ulster ended up there as well, given it, there's no suggestion they arrived super early. So I don't know. That's where we are.
Just on this, like, I think loads of people have jumped on this bandwagon of the changing rooms. So anyone I've spoken to during the week, we're talking about the changing rooms, but they weren't watching the match.
Yeah.
I would love now if they transferred this to actually watching the match and then give out about the changing facilities as well.
Well, 100%. And that was the point I was making at the start with media, which I'm very much a part of as well, and we all are. So, would we have spent as long talking about how the Munster backs played, for instance, as this? You suspect not, and that's a reality as well, which we're all kind of guilty of. Let's talk about the Munster backs then, Niamh Briggs. So Leinster 7, Munster 19, and Munster 7-0 down in this game, and then Chloe Pearce, who you've all mentioned as maybe could do a job for Ireland as well, scored 2 tries. So that's Munster 3 for 3, which you've got to be pretty happy with.
Yeah, hugely, I think. I said before the game, for us, it was a win-win for this season. We sat down as a management beforehand. We wanted to develop as many new girls as we could. I think, 12 new caps over the space of 3 games really gave us that impetus to be able to marry probably a bit of experience with a lot of youth. And yeah, look, I think, there was a huge amount of buy-in from that summer programme. And I think, there's so many exciting young players out there, not just from Munster, but across the board. There was a lot of talent from all the provinces. That's why I'm just frustrated that we've spent so much time talking about the previous stuff when I feel like we've there's always been question marks. Back me up on this about the Inter-pros and their value. I think they were definitely valuable this year, definitely from a Munster perspective, because I think the average age of the squad was, take out Quinny, was about 21. So look, it was hugely satisfying, and for a lot of those girls, the more experienced girls, they had never won in Donnybrook before or Energy Park, so to be able to do that was a huge monkey off the back as well.
And so, Niamh, how does all this work then? You've got young talent all over the province and they're playing with their clubs. Oh, well, they're not at the moment, obviously, with COVID, but they would be training or playing with their clubs. How often are you in contact with them? How do you identify who to bring in? How does all that work from your perspective then?
So we got appointed around April, and we sent out just when things started to open up a small bit. So we had small clusters of skill-based groups around May. And it was basically like an open email, went to a load of clubs, basically most clubs in Munster, I think. And then we did like a 4-week block of Monday, Wednesdays in our Crescent Rugby Club, where we just looked at skill-based stuff. We broke everything down. We didn't want to just have a one-off trial game, because we felt like it had been so long since many of them had played rugby. Probably would have been negligible of us to be able to go straight into anything to do a contact. So we did a 4 or 5 week block of just skills, conditioning, and an introduction back into contact. Right. Took a week break. And then we brought everybody back in for like a 2-week contact build up into a final game. And we made a squad, but what we did was we also kept around young girls that probably just needed another year, an introduction to senior rugby. So there was 5 or 6 of them that came training every Monday, Wednesday. We called them the tip girls. And one of them, would you believe, jumped into the main squad by the time the main squad was so just needed a little bit longer to develop. And then we played Connacht in a friendly match at the start of August, and she played so well in that we had to include her in the final squad. So right. There was a huge amount of opportunities for players. I think they'll all say that. But we just worked incredibly hard. We had training Monday, Wednesdays in Thomond Park. Huge backing from the province, and then we did 2 Saturdays, one with a game and one with a train session, and then a kind of a bonding. So it was great.
Great, brilliant. And when will this group come together again?
See, this is the thing. So we've obviously finished on Saturday, and they were all back into club training last night, because we have a week and a bit to prepare for the IL. And this is it. There's no continuity program. Munster are definitely trying. They're trying to set up a high performance. It's going that way, I think. Kind of an academy where you get girls maybe once a month, and it's very difficult because you've got to give them back to their club now. But if you know, my thing is that if we can still be involved as a coaching setup, then we can keep eyes on go at the girls, because we're all involved in the club game at some sort or other, and then you can be able to talk to them and tell them what you're looking for in order to be able to improve what we did this year in terms of the game plan and our core skills. But when we'll actually get to see them again, I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's just so different, the structure to the men's, for obvious reasons. But I know if I'm Niamh Briggs, for instance, Fiona, I'm thinking to myself, God, if I can have those, you know, that Munster group, the best players in the province, under good coaching, together more often, and, you know, higher intensity of training and skill sets put under pressure. And Niamh mentioned the young player who kind of accelerated through and, you know, fought her way onto the squad because she grew under the pressure and in that environment. If I'm Niamh Briggs, I'd want that happening as much as possible, you know, like that's just music to my ears. It's such a pity it's not going to happen more.
Yeah, and I think this has always probably been one of the issues with the Inter-pros. Where should it sit in the season? How long it should be? I know it should have been extended, but it came back because of COVID, that it was just the round-robin format, but that they were looking to extend it to semi-finals, finals. But where in the season should it fit? Because obviously you want them playing club rugby as well. But then the problem is a lot of those international girls don't play a huge amount of club rugby, and still won't this year with November internationals and stuff. So I hope that he is looking at the club game now going forward of players coming through. Well, hopefully that they qualify for the World Cup, that he is there to go around and look at the club game, because that's going to be hugely important for him as well. And to see those players that played so well in Inter-pros, whether it's Chloe Pearce or young Mabel O'Leary or Ella Roberts up in Leinster, like that, he tracks those players because they could be very useful in the year ahead if Ireland qualify. Yeah.
Alison, what did you make of the general standards? Did any players catch your eye? Obviously, a lot of young players on show given the international window.
Yeah, Mabel O'Leary caught my eye, as did Ella Roberts for Leinster, those two young players. But there was very good performances from the likes of Chloe Pearce, Dervin Nicovard. I thought Kate Sheehan's throwing the line out, she really would put some international players to shame with her accuracy. She really is really, really good. For Connacht, the number 8, Kate Fien, impressed me, as did Orla Dixon on the wing, who I think never does anything too wrong and plays really, really well. But I would hope that those players are being watched, or if it's not Niamh Briggs getting around to the matches, that it's a scout or someone employed by the RFU. That's their job, to go around and track these players and get them involved and go around, look at the club game, because I'm not sure how much of that is actually done. I know every video or everything is recorded now in videos, but I think seeing them in person is hugely important. But there was definitely players from all the provinces that impressed me. But it was the young ones, Ella Roberts and Maeve O'Leary, really did impress me.
Niamh, what's
Joe?
Yes, please
ask,
jump in. Yeah,
Niamh, a question. Just obviously, Nicole Cronin moving from 9 to 10. Was that because the emergence of Myrna Wall? Was it the lack of number 10, or was it just that you saw her skill set that she could transfer to number 10 and do remarkably well? Because I thought, again, she was another standout player that had moved positions and did really well.
Yeah, look, Nicole's literally came down after the first week we played Ulster. We were driving back down and she said, am I going back to 9 now? And I was like, no way. I was like, you're way more threatening running towards the touchline or to try line as opposed to the touchline. Look, Nicole Cronin's probably one of the most intelligent rugby players I've ever played with and never coached now, although I'm not coaching very long, but to her ability to be able to do things on the fly at an intensity that not many females can do. And Matt Brown's obviously the head coach, and he was just like blown away by her pace on the ball, her ability to distribute in small spaces. So we moved her in there, and it was a bit of a shock for her at first, but I think she's slowly starting to like it. And she was a threat. She was a threat through everything. And when you have a threat there, that's someone that's willing to take the ball to the line, and you're opening up space elsewhere. And her kick through for Aoife Doyle's try against Connacht, that was just literally like she looked over. They're both on the same level in terms of they're both international players. There's no call. It's just done on the go. And that probably set them apart and really, or set Nicole apart, her ability to be able to do things so quickly. I think it was probably a bit of both in terms of we didn't have a huge amount of 10s, but also I think, we could have definitely developed some good 10s in there, young girls as well. But we just felt that Nicole was, that was probably her strongest position.
Fiona, what's the standard like coming through? Say if you were to compare what you watched at the weekend and over the last couple of weeks with the quality that was coming through maybe a decade ago.
Oh, look, you look at these young players. Like, I only started playing rugby when I was 19. These players have now had underage rugby. They're stepping up to senior. They've a higher level of coaching probably than, I had none. So definitely there's more opportunities for them at a younger age. And to be honest, I was hugely impressed, particularly by that Munster-Leinster game. I wasn't expecting it to be so good and so enjoyable. And it's a testament to those players that were involved and also the management. It was really good, and it's just now giving them more opportunities, as you said earlier, to play at that higher level.
Yeah. So, Alison, has this been a very negative 45 minutes that we've all done, or worthwhile? I don't know. I mean, I guess that's the upside, is that the talent is maybe coming through at the Inter-Pro level, and maybe there's been a bit of a wobble in Irish rugby at 15s level over the last 5-6 years. But,
I suppose
there are causes for optimism.
Yeah, that's definitely cause for optimism, seeing those young players coming through, and even with the under-18 Inter-provincial series, there were some really good performances from players there. But at the same time, if a team isn't performing, it has to be called out, and it has to be questioned why the team isn't performing. We can't just go and say, it's great that we have a team and, support. If we want equality for women's rugby, we have to judge the team the same way that a men's team would be judged if they're not performing. So we have reasons to be hopeful after watching this Inter-Pro. And I think, in a way, I thought it might have been useful that the Irish girls played if the Inter-Pros had been slightly earlier, and they might have got some good game time before, the qualifiers. But another way, it was also good to see players that we haven't seen coming through. So there was pros and cons for the time of the year that it was. I probably preferred it myself when I was playing not to be so early in the year. I preferred to play some club before the Inter-Pros happened, but definitely players coming through that we haven't seen before that will be on the radar maybe in the next year or two for the international team. And the more players that can play at that level, the better our international team will be, hopefully, in the future. Yeah,
okay. Well, listen, guys, great discussion. Really enjoyed it. Loads in it. I guess we'll see how Ireland get on against Italy, and we may well drag you back for an even grimmer conversation next week.
No.
Hopefully not. We'll see how things go. But Niamh Briggs, Fiona Coghlan, Alison Miller, brilliant stuff. Thanks so much to you all for your time. Appreciate it, guys.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
There you go. That was Niamh Briggs, Fiona Coghlan and Alison Miller with us. And our rugby coverage is with thanks to Vodafone, proud sponsor of the Vodafone Women's Inter-provincial Championship. Back in 1 sec.
Rugby on Off the Ball.
With Vodafone, official sponsors of the Irish rugby team. Team of us. Everyone in.